What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Fourth and 15 with Mel and Smooth. I am Mel. Smooth is still on hiatus, working behind the scenes, but he will be back soon. But nevertheless, once again, joining us for a spell, I have Mike Waxman of College Football Focus. Mike, thank you for joining us again.
It is my pleasure to be here. Hope your weekend went well with football and all the stuff that goes on. And we're getting into the holidays, and now we're getting into the postseason, and they unveiled a lot of stuff today.
Indeed, they did. But before we go any further with the college football playoff and all of the other happenings around the world of college football, got to give a special shout out to KZ Productions as we are on their YouTube channel today. And this show is brought to you in part by, as soon as I can find it. Actually, nope, that ain't it. That ain't it. Oh, here it is. Uncle Rico's quarter mile challenge. He could throw a football over the mountains, and if they would have put him in, they probably would have won state. But we'll never know. Unfortunate accident. But nevertheless, we got a lot to get into, but we're just gonna start slow. So NCAA Division Three playoffs. Uh, what were your thoughts on the games that you did catch? Because not a lot of shockers. And then the one shocker we did see was St. John's ended up losing to Sequentin.
Yeah, that was a bit of a shock. I guess I probably should have known with the recent history of the program. I didn't think Mary Hardin Baylor was going to go very far, but I should probably know better than to doubt the MHB given how decorated the school has been for the last few years. I know that they had 3 losses this year. They were not up to their typical standards, but they're just kind of rolling through, and they've got a spot in the quarterfinals now, it looks like. And
They
they're a team
do.
that I think you have to maybe watch for.
They do. And that quarterfinal spot is actually against Johns Hopkins, who
Yes.
destroyed, well, they actually didn't destroy, they survived the game against Grove City. Now, I was not expecting Grove City to put up much of a fight. I'm going to be completely honest about that, just because it's Johns Hopkins, and Johns Hopkins, outside of lacrosse, is known for football. This one has me intrigued because Mary Hardin Baylor has to go to Johns Hopkins, and as we all know, it's cold
Yes.
around this time at Johns Hopkins. So we will see. I'm gonna be the first one to tell you I'm interested in seeing that matchup. And for the sake of everything right in the world, I hope ESPN starts covering the D3 games a little more in the quarterfinals instead of waiting till the semifinals and then the Stag Bowl.
Yeah, that would be great to get to see, especially there's going to be a 2 week break between them really showing games and starting with the playoffs. So the inventory's there. They could take it off of ESPN Plus, and they've got more than enough networks to show not only that, but the both of them, D2 and D3.
Exactly. I agree with that one. The other non-surprising move of the or game of the weekend was Mount Union takes care of Carnegie Mellon.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Carnegie Mellon usually a thorn in the side of Case Western, but you go into Mount Union, and as we all know, going to Alliance, going to Karis Stadium, it's tough. It's tough, and shout out to Carnegie Mellon for holding their own against Mount Union because a lot of teams go up there, as we saw last week with John Carroll. They go up
Right.
there, they get beat on, and
Yeah.
they get beat on handily. But you know, Carnegie Mellon has nothing to hang their hat on or hold their head down about, really. Actually, I would hang my hat on this one because you went into arguably the toughest place in all of Division III college football, and you survived. You survived long enough, but again, it's Mount Union. The defense is there. The offense has been putting up points all season. I didn't expect anything different, but Mount Union advances, and I believe if I'm reading this right, they got to go to Salisbury,
Yes.
which is weird because if I wasn't mistaken, I thought Mount Union had a top seed. So the NCAA is going to have to explain this one to me.
I was told that it is because of resources and ability to host. I think ability to host means lodging in the area if people are coming in. The stadium, I know, obviously could have enough people, but if there's not a lot of lodging, I think the NCAA likes to go to places. That's why in one of the FCS rounds, one of the seeded teams had to go on the road. It was the only FCS game. I think it was Illinois State was the 12, but they had to go on the road to play somebody because either their facilities weren't great or they didn't have enough in the area where they could like host the influx of people that would be coming in. I was told that by a buddy of mine who covers John Carroll on the regular, and he said that a lot of it is based on resources and ability to kind of not just deal with the football crowd, but the area as well. If you don't have a lot of hotels and lodging, they may give it to the other team. But Salisbury's
Okay.
undefeated too, so
Okay, but that's understandable. I don't think
yeah,
that should matter just because as a player, like I don't care. But
right,
if they're gonna say it that way, okay, fine, that makes sense. Let's move on.
right.
Other scores and other quarterfinal matchups that will be happening. North Central will face Springfield, and I don't know much about Springfield, but I do know North Central, former national champ, defending national champ. They got a lot to prove because realistically, there are only two teams left in the entire D3 bracket that you're pretty much under their shadow, which is Mount Union and Mary Hardin Baylor.
Mhm.
So, I'm not gonna say this is a tough game because legit North Central's been running through people. Their last two games, they've scored 40 points a game in their last two D3 matchups. But Springfield's got their work cut out for them, and you got to go to North Central. And I'm hoping Springfield can make this a game, but if not, it's going to be a long day for
Right,
Springfield.
definitely
Yeah.
will.
The other matchup is Wartburg will face actually, excuse me, Bethel will face Sequenciana in the top
Susquehanna.
Susquehanna.
Yeah.
I apologize. Don't beat me up for that, folks. Uh, Susquehanna. They will face Bethel, and Bethel. You know what? To be honest, the whole state of Minnesota in Division 3 beats up on each other.
They do.
Them in Wisconsin. So I'm wondering, is Bethel battle tested enough to where yes, they are at home, but are they battle tested enough to survive a game like this when you just obviously these are matchups we don't normally see
Right.
because for those watching Division 3, you don't travel. You don't. Your only travel is literally within your conference. You get maybe one or
Mhm.
two, depending on how you schedule it, non-conference games, and that's it. You're not
And,
going to
and they're
Oregon.
either in your state or bordering your state, so you don't go very far.
Exactly. So,
Mhm.
uh, going to Minnesota in the wintertime is going to be a pain in the ass, I can imagine.
It is, but Pennsylvania is known for its tough football. So
Yeah, but and I'm not saying because I've had as many wars as I've had with Pennsylvania teams over the years. I'm not saying Pennsylvania's football is not different, but it's different as opposed to being somewhere being
true.
somewhere you're familiar with. You've
Right.
a lot of these kids, to be honest, never been to Minnesota.
Right.
You don't realize how cold it gets until that first hit or that first piece of contact where it's probably in the 30s, below the 30s. The wind chill's probably going to be a factor in it, and then you take a hit. I'm just wondering, are they going to? You got to brave the elements first. So my first question
Right.
is, will they be able to brave the elements? My second question after that is, will they be able to stand up to a battle-tested Bethel?
I don't know. That'll definitely be a storyline to watch for sure.
I agree. So those are the D2 football matchups. and I'm excited because as a Mount Union fan, I want Mount Union to advance. I want to see Mount Union back in the Stag Bowl. It's been too long, but that's just me. That's just me. I already know people are going to be on my neck about it. It's okay. Moving on. We are Division 2 now, and I can't help but notice your hat says Rock, and
It does indeed.
you're wearing a lot of green.
Yep.
Could this happen to be because once again Slippery Rock advances to the semifinals or the quarterfinals against California PA? They actually were in a I'm not gonna say it was a shootout. They dominated. They dominated California PA. And are we surprised at this?
Well, if you remember, a couple weeks ago on this show, I said that while Valdosta State was my favorite, and we'll get to them in a minute, I said if there was a team that I'd look outside of the seeded teams that might make a run, I said Slippery Rock could be it. So I'm sort of touting myself, but I also like Slippery Rock because they have one of the long-standing Division 3 rivalries with Shippensburg. Slippery Rock and Shippensburg is like Lehigh Lafayette and like Yale, Harvard, obviously at the FCS level, and then the myriad rivalries you have at the FBS level. Shippensburg and Slippery Rock have been, it's one of the longest played and most intense rivalries at that level.
We're
So, Slippery Rock, I mean, they barely got by Kutztown last week. I mean, that was a 1 point game. So, yeah, to
hmm
dominate the way they did, I thought that was a little bit surprising because Cal PA is typically pretty good.
And with that, you actually pretty much run the state of Pennsylvania right now in Division 2, as far as PA teams being in the Division 2 playoffs. Now I'm gonna move to the right side of the bracket on my sheet here because this one was interesting. You called this. I didn't want to believe you, but you called it. Harding faced Grand Valley State, blew the doors off Grand Valley State, but they get to Ferris State and they get dog walked 41 to
Yeah,
7.
78 points.
I'm I'm curious. With Ferris playing the way they are, you're obviously going to have to see uh you're going to see Slippery Rock. It's a number 2 versus number 3 matchup. What what do you think is the outcome of this? Like, because me personally, I'm nervous for Slippery Rock, and the reason I'm nervous for Slippery Rock is because once again, this is a team you don't see,
Right.
and not only is it a team you don't see, Ferris is for real.
Oh, they are. They've been right in the national championship picture. I think didn't they either won one or were runner up a couple of years ago. What Slippery Rock is going to have to do, they're going to have to do what Michigan did against Ohio State. Slow the game down, play it on their terms. If they have to punt, they punt, but then dig in with your defense because if Ferris gets up on you like 14-0 or 17-3, you're not catching up. But
Yeah.
if you can play it almost like one of those phone booth games where you're running off tackle, your line is maybe moving them back a little bit. You've got a puncher's chance if it's close going into the fourth quarter because you've dictated the terms. You got a shot to win. But if Ferris can do what it normally does, I'm kind of with you. I worry a little bit too because 2 weeks ago they scored 78. Last week they scored 41, and they're just firing on all cylinders right now.
On top of that, you're right. Defending national champ, they've been in the picture multiple times, and once again, Slippery Rock going to a place they've never seen, cold weather state. It does get cold
Mhm.
in Michigan, folks. Don't let we in Ohio, but don't let it fool you. It gets cold in Michigan. Not only do you have a great weather environment, you have a great environment for your fans.
Yeah.
Is this a situation where Slippery Rock's not only going to have to fight the elements, but are they going to have to fight their fans as well?
Yeah, they may. I mean, I saw on the college football show earlier today. They had Curt Cignetti on, and he admitted when they came into Ohio Stadium, we had to change our counts, we had to change our cadences, silent count, because they literally could not hear anything. Obviously, D3 doesn't get quite that loud. They are kind of on top of you, but there aren't 100,000 people in their stadiums.
True.
But those fans too, if your team is humming, they can get loud. So Slippery Rock may need to do some quick tempo stuff occasionally. May need to do some silent count, do some check with me, so that they're not thrown off by the environment.
I agree because again, this is one of those scenarios playing in Michigan, no matter what the level is. Anytime you play in a state that hates your state,
Mm-hmm.
sports wise, it's automatically a problem, whether it's the team or the atmosphere. It causes the big problem. So I agree with that, and I'm with you on that. But my pick, to be honest, is probably going to be Ferris State, just because they have a lot of momentum riding with them.
They do. I would tend to agree. I will wear my Slippery Rock hat, but I probably would tend to agree that Ferris, I mean, unless they turn the ball over 4 or 5 times, which that's always a great equalizer, I find it hard to believe that Slippery Rock can kind of keep up with them. But if it's a game till the fourth quarter, who knows? Anything can happen. But I do think Ferris State gets it done.
Fair enough. Um, Virginia Union, Rico, I'm sorry. I apologize. Don't shoot me over this. They had a magical season. Rico is a Virginia Union alumni. So is Ben Wallace. So is Charles Oakley. Shout out to all of those guys. They had a magical season. I am not taking anything away from Virginia Union. We saw Virginia Union up close last year at the HBCU Classic. They were serious, but you went into a very hostile environment playing against Valdosta. And with that, not only were they the number one seed, but at the same time, Valdosta is very hard to beat at home. Valdosta is no stranger to the national championship picture. They got hardware in the trophy case, so they're no stranger to bringing home trophies. Am I wrong for assuming that Virginia Union had a puncher's chance in this game?
No, I mean they've like you said, they've been putting it together. Their offense, they were pretty balanced. I mean, the offense was good, the defense was good. Generally, if you're balanced like that, even if you're facing a team that's used to winning and maybe has a little bit of a talent advantage, if you're even and you're good on both sides of the ball, you've always got a shot. But Valdosta was just, as you said, too much at home. They're used to winning. I think they want to kind of get it back and they're just their last 5 games have not been close. Their closest game, I think, has been 16 points. They won 52-0. They won 49-3. They've won all of these huge margins. And I just think that they're kind of on them. They look like a team that's on a mission right now.
I agree. And with that, here are the semifinal matchups. Obviously, Slippery Rock, the Rock goes to Ferris State. I don't think Slippery Rock's going to ease up, but it's going to be a tough game. Ferris State,
Yep.
obviously, the defense is very hard nosed. They hit you and they keep hitting you. Slippery Rock's offense is very high powered, but the problem is, once again, you're going into a colder weather state, not a cold weather state, a colder weather state. And for the folks at home watching, it does make a difference. Playing
Mhm.
in Ohio's cold weather and PA's cold weather is totally different from going to somewhere, say, like New York, somewhere in Wisconsin. I would even say going to Canada. I've played in Canada before. I have never felt cold air like that. You're going to Ferris State. Ferris State, better hope it doesn't snow, because if it snows, I'm giving this one automatically to Ferris State because they have the advantage. They know how to play in that. But I think the magical number for the Rock would be 3. If they can get 3 turnovers in the game against Ferris State, they got a chance.
Mhm.
And if they can capitalize off of those turnovers, we may see the Rock in the national championship.
That would be cool. I agree. It's a tough mountain to climb, not an impossible one, but they need kind of a confluence of things going in their favor And again, if that happens, they've played well enough this year. They haven't panicked that if it's close in the fourth quarter, they're not going to be awed like, oh, wow, we've stayed with these guys. They'll just keep playing and they'll find a way to win. But it's easier said than done for sure.
Very much so. And thank you for being the insight to that because again, a lot of people don't get to watch Division 2, and I'm really mad that Notre Dame College had closed down because that was some exciting football to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And especially watching the rivalry against Slippery Rock in the playoffs, that was awesome. So, special good luck to the Rock, good luck to Ferris State. On the other side of that bracket, Minnesota State has to go all the way down to Georgia. Now, the reason I think this is a interesting matchup is because there's going to be a slight change for the human body for Minnesota State players. You're going from 0-degree weather to 60-degree weather.
Mm-hmm.
How, because you've been in the college football game longer than I have as an analyst, how do you prepare for that? Because I know as a player, I know how to prepare for it as a player, but when you're not playing anymore, the weather change to your body is vastly different. At least I think so. So how would you prepare to go from below 0 to 60 degrees and not feel like your body's missing something?
Well, I would do it. I'm always a proponent of getting to a place a little bit earlier than you need to. Obviously, the game is on Saturday. They're probably going to leave Friday, although it is a long trip for them. Maybe they leave Thursday afternoon because it is a longer trip than usual. But if I knew that it was like one of my last games, and again, they don't have the travel budgets that the FBS schools have, that they could leave whenever they want to and stay at a nice hotel for 6 or 7 days.
Right.
They don't really have the athletic budget to do that. But if you can get there early and get a little acclimated and do some activity in that warmer weather, then come game day, it's not going to be a huge shock. If they get there Friday afternoon and all they can do is do a walkthrough, and then the game happens on Saturday going full speed instead of walking speed, it's going to now the transition from hot to cold is a lot worse, but there is still a transition from cold to hot.
It is. It is. And I don't think people who are the casual fan is again, it's nothing against the casual fan, but it's different when you've been in the atmosphere. You've seen it
Mm-hmm.
as an analyst. I've seen it as an analyst. I've seen it as a player. It's different. Don't let
Right.
anybody it's like going to play in Denver. A lot of people think playing in Denver it's a myth. Those players are telling you the truth. I've seen players lose appendixes and spleens because they've played in Denver and their body wasn't able to adjust to the mile high sea level air.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So don't let people tell you who are not in the know or who have not been around that scenario. Don't allow them to tell you, oh man, that's just a myth. It's not a myth. Playing in cold weather, coming down to mild weather, it's a drastic change. People have
Mm-hmm.
gotten sick. I've gotten sick from going from 20 degrees in Cleveland to 60 degrees in Georgia. That's a 40-degree swipe. That doesn't it's not going to kill you, but it does affect how you take in air. It
Right.
affects how you sit and adjust your body to being cold for 5 minutes before you left, and then sitting in 60 degrees like it's about to be April. It is
Right.
different.
It's much more conducive if it can happen gradually rather than go from 20 to 60. If you can go from 20 to 40 to 60, you're a lot better off. But if you're sitting on a bus the whole time or sitting on a plane the whole time, 3 hours from now, I left when it's 20. Now I can be wearing shorts and it's 65 degrees.
And
So,
now I got a cold that I can't get rid of while I'm about
right,
to play a game.
right.
So I'm Minnesota State has been in the playoff picture more times than we can count. But when you go to Valdosta, it's just different. They've been on ESPN, so people have seen them. I actually watched the game where Notre Dame went down and tried to. They held their own. A lot of teams do
Mhm.
hold their own against Valdosta, but playing Valdosta after never playing them before is just
Right.
different. It's a
Mhm.
gear that they have that you don't see from most teams in your own conference. And once again, Division 2, you don't travel very far. Border state, maybe in state. That's it. And for Minnesota State, you're going almost 2,000, 2,500 miles south. This could turn into a problem. If this turns
Well,
into
it
a
could,
shootout,
and if you also look at Minnesota's last really 3 games, 20-19, 26-23, 27-23. Part of me says that's battle tested, but part of me says you're scraping by when Valdosta is like, okay, we can put our reserves in the third quarter. So
that's the key. That's the key. If Valdosta looks to turn this into a shootout, I don't think Minnesota State's going to hang because
right,
that speed, that's firepower, and obviously the defense is there because nobody can score against them.
right.
I'm going with Valdosta on this one. Anybody who's a
Yep.
Minnesota State fan, I apologize, but we got to go with the obvious, and the obvious tells me you're about to have problems going to Valdosta.
I would tend to agree that's 2 votes for Valdosta to get it done.
All right. Second round of the FCS while we have that time. Second round of the FCS. But before we get to that, I do got to send a shout out to Jackson State as they dominated Southern in the SWAC championship 41-13. Jackson State continues their dominance. As a Grambling State fan, I just wish the season would have been a little bit better had they beat Southern.
Yeah,
I don't know.
they seem to stumble once a year against a team they probably should beat. Even
I
when Prime was there, they would have a game where you're just scratching your head like, what? They lost to them?
Yeah, but with Jackson State, I will say this: Prime left the program in good hands,
Oh yeah, he did.
and with that, it shows. Because Jackson State, realistically, historically, and this is just my opinion, a lot of people are going to say different, but historically, the SWAC has only belonged to two teams, Grambling and Southern.
Mhm.
When you look at the totality of the SWAC and everybody that's been produced in the SWAC as an NFL player, Jackson State is up there. I mean, they produce Walter Payton for crying out loud.
Mhm.
So with this, my question to you is, do you think there will be a team within the next 2 years to dethrone Jackson State?
That's tough because all the other teams are pretty close in terms of talent level, in terms of being familiar with each other. Obviously, it's a pretty concentrated area down there. They're recruiting the same pool of high school kids. Um, I don't know because I'll be the first to admit it's hard enough following recruiting at the FBS level. So to follow at the FCS level and especially SWAC and the MEAC, which might have a little better athletes than some of the other divisions, um, I don't know them all that well. I just know that if you're in Louisiana and you're in Alabama and Georgia and you're recruiting that area, you're getting good players because a lot of those states, the second and third choices, the first choices go to LSU and go to Alabama and go to Auburn. But the leftovers, people may say, well, you can only go to Jackson State or you can only go to Southern. Well, they've got some pretty good players going to those schools.
They do.
So I don't know what the lay of the land is as far as the other schools. I know that Southern has been good for a little while, and they would be my natural response, but I don't know in depth enough about the other teams. Maybe someone's laying in the weeds to jump out. I don't know who that would be.
Fair enough. Fair enough. We'll come back to that next college season because I actually have I've wondered with Jackson State being in the top tier, I've wondered if they're going to be somebody that dethrones them in the SWAC. But quarterfinal matchups for FCS. Idaho will travel to 13-0 Montana State. I'm not going to lie to you. I was not expecting Idaho to be this good this year. And here they are, surprising. They're the dark horse out of the quarterfinal matchups. My money's still on Montana State.
I would
anytime,
definitely agree with that.
anytime you
That's
got
a
to go
really
to a
good
cold
program.
weather, anytime you got to go to a cold weather state, and they are the powerhouse that everybody believes them to be, it's going to be tough. I'm not even going to throw the cold weather at this game because Idaho's cold weather, Montana's cold weather. You're used to it. Are you used to the defense that Montana State has? Because obviously they're not allowing a lot of points per game. I think the last I looked, they allowed 14 points a game throughout the course of the season. What do you do in that scenario when you know that defense is not going to let you score?
Yeah, you got to hope that something breaks, a return touchdown, a short field with maybe you get a turnover with a short field. Because, yeah, teams that aren't going to let you march down the field, you got to get creative and manufacture something. So sometimes you have to tell your defense, hey, guys, swarm the ball, see if you can get us a short field, or return guys, be on your P's and Q's because maybe we can break one here. But when you've got a defense that's as good as Montana State's is, it's kind of an uphill battle.
I have to agree. I have no rebuttal for that because the the Montana State games I've seen this year, you're not really getting past the 50, and if you do get past the 50, you'd be lucky to come away with 3 points.
Yes.
All right, that's a Friday night matchup for those wondering. Saturday games. Incarnate Word goes to South Dakota State. If you haven't noticed, this is a Montana and Dakota playoffs. So don't be surprised, folks. Do not be surprised if you happen to see a Dakota in the championship. But Incarnate Word goes to South Dakota. Um, the Jackrabbits, they've been on College Game Day. They've rode that momentum for the last couple of years. I don't know much about Incarnate Word. I know they're 11-2, but I got to go on the eye test, and my eye test has shown me South Dakota State has what it takes to get back to the championship.
Yeah, they've been. I mean, their offense has been really good the last few years. Mark Gronowski, the COVID year, when they kind of, to a lot of people, came out of the woodwork and sort of dethroned North Dakota State, which had been the king of the hill for such a long time. And Mark Gronowski was his freshman quarterback that people didn't know a whole lot about. They've had a really good offensive line. They had a couple offensive linemen drafted last year. They've had some good linebackers. So South Dakota State has been kind of the real deal. I believe Incarnate Word is where Cam Ward was
Okay. But he's
before
not
he went
there
to the top
anymore.
level. I think that Cam Ward was at Incarnate Word.
But he's not there anymore, which again,
No,
I have
I agree with that. I'm
no,
just saying that for
I
folks, if you want to put something together, they do have some high quality players. In fact, I think they had a quarterback a few years ago whose name escapes me that was also pretty good. They've
well,
generally been known for their offense.
what I was gonna say was we don't get to see ESPN has this knack. And again, they're probably gonna come after me about this, but it's also kind of true. We don't see enough of these teams that even at the FCS level, we don't see enough of them. And because you pick and choose who we as viewers get to watch, it kind of makes it hard for us analysts to say, here's our opinion on Incarnate Word, or here's our opinion on, you know, Edward Waters, just throwing the team
Mhm.
out there because we don't get to see them. And even with regional television, it's hard pressed because sometimes they're debating on what's going to be the draw. So, uh, just being honest, my eye test through this season has been South Dakota State being they'll probably end up in the semifinals, maybe even the championship.
Yeah, certainly them, North Dakota State. South Dakota has also come up a little. Obviously, you've got both the Montana schools. We're noticing a trend here. Cold weather seems to rule the day in FCS, the
It
cold weather
does.
states.
It does. And it's funny that you mentioned South Dakota because they'll be facing UC Davis
Yes.
at 3 o'clock on Saturday. And the crazy part about that is these are two teams with actual speed. Like I've seen speed with South Dakota, and obviously, it's California. California's got great speed on both sides of the ball. So if this turns into a track meet, would I be wrong in saying I got UC Davis on this one?
No, they've had I mean they're kind of used to winning as well. They're another program that's been around for a while. Also known for offense and some
Hmm.
quarterbacks who can deliver the football. But you're right, they've really increased throughout their whole team. They've increased their level of speed. It used to just be the guys on offense. Now their defense can kind of flow to the ball and get there and wreck some game plans.
Put a hat on. What did coach say? Put a hat on everybody. That,
Yeah.
that's that's what it is with UC Davis. So I just honestly, if this turns into a track meet, I don't know. I've seen North Dakota State. They do have the speed, but looking at UC's offensive production throughout the course of this season, it's gotten better every game. Win or lose, they're actually what? They're 11-2. So win or lose, their offensive production has improved. If this, I again, I'm saying this, I probably sound like a broken record, but if it turns into a track meet, my money is going with UC Davis, cold weather or not.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that.
And while we're moving on, last week you mentioned Mercer. Lo and
I
behold,
did.
Mercer is going to North Dakota State in another quarterfinal matchup.
Yeah,
Is
Mercer is
this
coached by Mike Jacobs, who was at Notre
Notre
Dame
Dame
College,
College
then went
and
on to
Lenore
Lenore
Rye?
for a couple of years, and now has kind of really just stepped up the ladder. And he's had Mercer playing some really good football. And I think people expected them this last game to lose, but they ended up winning. And now they've got like kind of the one of the real bullies of the block. He can really see how his program stacks up because this is kind of a measuring stick game for him.
And it sucks because they ended up beating Rhode Island 17-10 last week. And my sister's nephew, I feel bad because I got to hear about this later. I know I'm going to hear about this later, but shout out to my sister and her nephew. But realistically, I'm going with North Dakota State. North Dakota State's been there. You're going to the
Oh yeah,
Fargo. You're going to the Fargo Dome. It's loud. It's chaotic. It's everything that you thought it would be if you were going to say Arrowhead Stadium. But it's indoors. So now and the crowd literally at the Fargo Dome is on top of you. There's no way to escape the crowd. So if if Coach Jacobs can get the crowd factor under control, I think they have a shot. But if they don't get that crowd factor under control, scoring a couple points, I'll say 10 points in the first quarter, touchdown field goal. If they don't get it to that level, it's going to be trouble all day.
yeah, it is. When you're kind of the underdog, you have to surprise some people and let them know, hey, we're here. If they can just do what they normally do, they're going to say, okay, you're just another one of these teams, and we're going to walk over you the way that we've walked over everybody else.
Final prediction to you. Final prediction of the semifinals and the possible FCS championship.
Um, I know that it sounds like it's kind of chalky to say South Dakota State or North Dakota State. I do think that because they have been so dominant the last few years, I would not be shocked if they ended up winning it. But it might be time for one of the Montana schools to
Really?
to take it. I know that the Grizz has a great return man in Junior Bergen. He had one. They were actually on TV against South Dakota State in the regular season. I want to say 2 weeks before the end of the regular season, and they ended up pulling the upset. And so I think that maybe one of the Montana schools is ready for their time in the sun. But if it comes back, if I read the next morning after the finals that South Dakota State or North Dakota State has won, I'll just yawn and say, okay, that was kind of predictable.
Okay. I'm going to be the opposite. I'm going to play devil's advocate with this one. UC Davis and Idaho make it to the semifinals in the first bracket. Or actually, UC Davis and Mercer make it in the first part of the bracket. Incarnate Word and Idaho make it in the other part. The reason I'm saying this is because looking at Idaho, and again, Idaho's with dome. For those watching, Idaho's a dome team. I know you don't think of Idaho having a dome, but they are a dome team. Not only that, they're sneaky. They have the ability to surprise teams, pull the upsets. Yeah, when you're playing against a team like LSU or somebody of that nature, yeah, it seems like they stink, but they don't. They just don't have the facilities, the resources, the athletes that LSU, Wisconsin, or anybody else would have. But what they do very well is keep a balanced offense and a tight defense. And that can create a recipe to scare people and at least give them the ability to pull momentum away from the other team. So if Incarnate and on the other side of that, if Incarnate Word can survive the weather and South Dakota State's defense, I think they have a shot. So my devil's advocate picks: Idaho, Incarnate Word, UC Davis, and Mercer. Possible championship, I'm gonna say Mercer and Idaho.
That would be, especially for Mercer, that would be a great, I guess, caveat or a great feather in the cap, I guess, to get there in Mike Jacobs' first season coaching. I mean, you remember Alabama's FCS game this year was against Mercer,
And they had
so
trouble. You had
they did.
trouble with Mercer.
First quarter and a half, Mercer was kind of doing what they wanted. Then the athletes took over. It wasn't like 55-7. If I remember, it was maybe 38-14 or something like that. It was fairly respectable. So so that would definitely be very interesting. I am just
I,
going to default again, not that the four teams you mentioned couldn't make it. I think it would be nice to get some new blood in there. I think that would shake things up. Just at that level, change is so difficult. I mean, North Dakota State won it what, 6 years in a row, I think.
yes,
They were even
yes.
playing the same finalist for five of those. So it it is difficult when a program gets to the top and someone else comes up like an emerging like South Dakota State, like the Montana schools, they stay at the top for a while. It's hard for new people to break through. So
Very much
I'm
so.
going to say three of them. I'm going to say South Dakota State, North Dakota State, one of the Montanas. Um, I may go with Mercer as well. I just think that there seems to be something about them, the way that they're playing. I think that they could, if there's going to be a breakthrough team from the list that you mentioned, I could see it being Mercer just because Jacobs seems to really almost immediately from the beginning, these guys are buying into what he's selling and they don't back down. They played Alabama, so it's like, okay, you guys aren't going to show us anything we haven't seen because we
Exactly.
played Alabama in Tuscaloosa.
And
So
that people don't realize how hard it is. Cam Newton even came out and said it's dangerous to play in Tuscaloosa.
yeah,
So
it
I can
definitely is.
imagine.
So I think you're going to have three of the holdovers: South Dakota State, North Dakota State, one of the Montanas. Let's let one of the newcomers break through. and I will go with the Mercer Bears.
Fair enough. Now, I don't have a drum roll, but here we are at the we're here for what we came for the folks at home. Uh, I do have to check this one comment. Austin, bro, I love you, but we haven't even seen anybody play yet. Let's just hold off. We won't see Oregon until the second round. Let's just slow down a bit and let's do what we came here to do, which is go through the actual bracket. So here we go.
There it is.
First round matchups goes as such. On our left side of the bracket, Tennessee and Ohio State, Texas and Clemson. Arizona State and Oregon have the first round byes, being conference champs. On the right side of our bracket, Indiana and Notre Dame. Down at the bottom, SMU and Penn State. Georgia and Boise State have the byes, being conference champions. Now, Mike, if you'll indulge me for this segment, I'd
Okay.
like to go through each game, and I want to get your thoughts because this is important. For those that watched the selection show, Miami and Bama got left out. Was that a fair selection to you? Because we know everybody at the major companies had a problem with it, but was this a fair selection to you?
I think it was fairer to leave Miami out. A lot of the arguments that people are making about SMU, to a lesser extent, Notre Dame and Penn State and Texas, read it as no real marquee wins, a kind of a mess schedule strength in the 40s and the 50s. I didn't have a problem with Miami being left out. You know what? Don't want to be left out. Beat Georgia Tech. But Alabama, I thought with a schedule strength of 15,
Mm-hmm.
and I know they had the bad losses. I mean, Vanderbilt's an okay team, but Alabama's not supposed to lose to Vanderbilt. I really think what sealed their fate was going down to Norman and laying that egg, losing by 21 to a 500 Oklahoma team.
That was it.
Still,
That was it. I agree.
still, even with that, there was a part of me that said, even though I don't like being one of the conspiracy theorist types, I've seen the big brands get in occasionally over a team that is an up and comer that maybe is a little more deserving. That little devil in my head said, you know what? They're going to put Alabama in. They're going to penalize SMU, even though SMU played their butts off and got beat by a 56-yard field goal on the last play of the game.
Who saw that coming?
And I said, they're going to find a way to get Alabama in. So part of me, I applaud the committee for sticking to what they said. Warde Manuel said on Tuesday, teams playing in their championship games, we are not going to heavily penalize them if their games are close. And Penn State was close, Texas was close, SMU was close. None of them dropped a ton to where they even really had to worry about being out. So I do applaud the committee for sticking to its word because there has been chicanery on these committees before, and I kind of expected it again. On the flip side, I do think Alabama's resume is better than SMU's. And when you're talking about deserving, I mean, they have the best win in the sport, beating Georgia. Everyone talked about the hot team, South Carolina. They beat South Carolina too.
Very true.
Missouri, for all intents and purposes, is ranked. I don't count that as a great win because Missouri is overrated, but by the committee's criteria, they are a ranked win. So they have 3 ranked wins and only 1 loss. And I mean, okay, LSU isn't great, but LSU and Baton Rouge, always tough. They beat LSU. So Alabama went through the meat grinder that is the SEC. It's not as much of a meat grinder this year as it has been, but we saw that Georgia Texas game, how hard those teams were hitting and
Yeah.
how fast those guys get to the perimeter. You think, oh, I can get a sweep here. No, you can't.
No, you can't.
So part of me is glad SMU got in because it kind of said, you know what, the committee said one thing and they stuck to it. Part of me says, I do feel a little bad for Alabama because side by side resume, they are better and probably got in. And I do worry about going forward. What is this going to do for teams that want to schedule tough games? The committee has said you played a tough schedule, but we're not letting you in. Alabama's supposed to be playing Ohio State in like 2030. Is that game going to get canceled? Georgia's supposed to be playing Michigan. Is that game going to get canceled? Because now part of me says this is a knee jerk reaction. You didn't get in. And it's just knee jerk for this year. But this is the first year. So we don't really have a template. If this happens next year or the year after that, 3 years, where we've seen one team have a tough schedule and get left out for teams in the conference championship game, you're going to see a lot of teams dumbing down those schedules. And for fans, that's not a good thing. You don't want week 1 and week 2 to be Ohio State playing against Eastern Michigan or Georgia playing against Tennessee Tech. You want to see some marquee matchups early in the year because once you get into conference play, you're pretty much playing teams you're familiar with.
True.
So overall, I like SMU getting in. I like New Blood getting in. So overall, I guess I'm pretty happy. But I can see Alabama people being upset. I think they have a legitimate gripe too.
I'm putting this back up for my side of this. First off, this is probably going to roll some heads, but fuck Alabama. Here's why. This is the post Nick Saban era. This guy gave you the keys to the Lamborghini and you crashed it. Not only did you crash it against Vanderbilt, you crashed it against an Oklahoma team that I saw memes and gifs and social media pictures where all of the SEC teams were like literally stomping mud holes in the Texas and Oklahoma mascots.
Mm-hmm.
This was Texas's and Oklahoma's first year in the SEC. This was supposed to be a welcome they would not forget. What do you give them as Alabama? You give Texas a win and you give Oklahoma a win. I can't prove this, but in my head, Nick Saban was probably on the phone. Wait, what? You lost to Vanderbilt and Oklahoma? Man, hold my beer. I can't sit and say Bama deserved to be in because one, let's call a spade a spade. Vanderbilt ain't been good since Jay Cutler left.
Right.
Number two, this is an Oklahoma team that's rebuilt. This is a legit rebuild for Oklahoma. This would have been the time to take advantage because once Oklahoma starts recruiting, you're going to have problems. And this would have been the time to take advantage, establish dominance. You failed. Those two losses, yeah, they're going to hurt. As far as Notre Dame getting in, this was the year for Notre Dame to be in. Reason being, it's an independent. If people don't realize this by now, the independents have the toughest road to get to a national championship because they're not in a conference. They have to schedule the toughest opponents that will say, yeah, we'll play you. That's been Notre Dame's NO for over 100 years. This was them. If they're going to show they belong in the playoff from here on out, it's now. To be fair, you obviously in Notre Dame's case, you handled one of the best offenses in the country when you played Army. Excuse me, you played Army. You handled them soundly and beat them what 42-7.
Uh-huh.
And now you got who I truthfully this would have been my only swap. I would have put Miami in over Indiana. I'm not sold on Indiana. Once again, this is one of those scenarios. Indiana really hasn't been good since Antoine Randall left. For those that don't know, Antoine Randall, Super Bowl winning wide receiver, but was quarterback of the Hoosiers.
He was kind of the Slash of the Big Ten.
There you go.
Cordell Stewart did his thing.
There you go. But with that would have been my only swap. Get Indiana out of it because if Indiana lays an egg, Nobody's going to take them serious. If you don't at least have a good showing against Notre Dame, nobody from here on out is going to take you serious in that room with the committee. I'm sorry. That's just what it is. Boise State, if you know Boise State's track record, this ain't nothing new. They're probably going to be the bracket buster. And the fact that they got a first round bye should let you know this is not a game you want to play because you're going to have to go to the Smurf turf. I'm sorry. Uh, can Penn State redeem themselves?
Well, you know what? Against Oregon, I thought that's the best I've seen, the most efficient offense I've seen Penn State run in years. Obviously, Ohio State had the recipe to kind of shut them down, but when they brought Andy Kotelnicki in from Kansas to run the offense, that's kind of what it was supposed to look like. Getting Drew Allar out on the edge, making some throws to Tyler Warren, and running those outside zone plays with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. They had what, 282 yards of rushing? I mean, Oregon had been pretty much clamping down on teams defensively, and Penn State just had chunk plays. And Allar did not seem like he was rattled by anything. Oregon was just a better team, but Penn State did not get boat raced. They actually looked like a team. Everyone always said, well, if Penn State had gotten into the playoffs in previous years, it would have been like just a bloodletting. They would have lost 49-7 because the offense couldn't get out of its own way. This Penn State team actually, I think, has a shot to do something. And it's not often that their running backs take a back seat to anybody, but they're going to take a back seat to Ashton Jeanty. That's going to be an interesting game because Boise wants to get it done on the ground. And as much as Kotelnicki has the exotic formations and the motions and the make you think we're going to pass, at heart, he wants to run. He wants to do outside zone. He wants to do stretch plays. He wants to he wants to show you passing sets and run out of them. So this is going to be two teams that are going to lean on the run. And I am fascinated by this matchup. That's assuming Penn State gets by SMU, which I don't want to make the assumption because Kevin Jennings and that SMU offense are legitimate.
Yes, they are. Now, it's funny that you brought up Oregon because there were only 3 real tough games that I saw Oregon play all season this year. The Boise State game, which they won by 3.
Uh-huh.
And for those watching, keep in mind a lot of people in the Oregon realm feel Boise State is a subpar opponent. They are not. This is a team that's been a buster for the last 25, almost 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
So don't think that Boise State is just going to roll over and just let you walk over them. They are not.
Go watch 2006 Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma when they ran the
There,
Statue of Liberty play.
and there you go. That was where I was alluding to. The second game was the Ohio State game. You won that game by 1 point.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows if Will Howard has the wherewithal to slide sooner, are we even talking about Oregon being number 1 all season? Probably not. Number 3, the last tough game that they played seriously was outside of the conference championship was the game against Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
How do you struggle against Wisconsin? And this is the Big Ten kid in me talking. I remember when Wisconsin had Ron Dayne. That was when I feared Wisconsin. I have not feared Wisconsin ever since Ron Dayne left.
They would have Ron Dayne. They would have 3 linebackers who would just get after you.
But
You'd
that's
play
not
a 16-13 game and you'd be hurt and bruised for 3 weeks.
and you still got to play more games after that.
Right.
Those are the 3 toughest games I've seen Oregon play. Everybody else they've dog walked. I get it. I get what Austin said. I understand why he said it. But if those are your 3 toughest games, can we really rely on you to be okay? So throw caution to the wind on this. What happens if Ohio State beats Tennessee at home and you get a rematch with the same team you just beat by a point earlier in the season?
Well, and you're facing them, and Ohio State admitted this. They've tweaked the defense since then because Oregon was able to hit so many of those downfield plays. Obviously, they abused Denzel Burke and Davidson Igbinosun downfield. That's not the same defense that Ohio State is playing now. Ohio State's getting
Exactly.
after people better. They're keeping the edges from being exploited because Oregon likes to send Dylan Gabriel on RPOs or Jordan James out to the outside where he can get a defender and juke him and go up the sideline. Not the same defense. So I'm with you on that. I do think Oregon's a pretty good team. Dylan Gabriel, the thing that impressed me last night about him, Penn State would get right in his face and he delivered the ball right on time. That guy, give me that guy, and I'll take my chances against you and whoever you have because I really enjoy watching that kid play. I liked him at Oklahoma. I couldn't believe Oklahoma was going with Jackson Arnold over him. And I wonder what the Oklahoma offense would look like if it had kept Dylan Gabriel because
That's a
Oklahoma
fair
can't
assessment.
score.
That's a fair assessment.
So so I do think Oregon's very good, but that is a legitimate point. Their strength of schedule, I think, is like 58, 55. So I think
I'm
that is, if there's one legitimate concern about Oregon, is that the good teams they've played, Penn State, Boise, and Ohio State, they've been very narrow wins.
and
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 if
and
one
I'm
of
I'm
those teams
glad you
can
brought that
turn the
up.
table, then maybe they're out.
I'm glad you brought that up because I'm looking at Oregon's schedule right now. You beat Idaho by 10, you 24-14. You beat Boise State by 3. You dog walk your little brother in Oregon State. You dog walk UCLA. You destroy Michigan State, but who hasn't? You destroy Purdue, but who hasn't? Illinois, you beat soundly, but who hasn't? Michigan, you handled. If this was Michigan last year, you don't have that same win. But nevertheless, you beat Michigan soundly. You beat Maryland soundly. You not lose. You win narrowly against Wisconsin. You win handily against Washington. And then you survive your Penn State Conference Championship game. That's not a good schedule to hold your hat on because half of that schedule was a cupcake schedule. I'm going back to this comment. I know Austin, if you think nobody's beating Oregon, something's wrong with you because looking at that schedule, outside of Ohio State, Penn State, and Wisconsin, in that scenario, who did Oregon really play? Who did they play? Because everybody they played outside of Purdue, Illinois, and Michigan State, for real, you played already last year. You played your little brother, you beat him. You played UCLA, you beat him. You played Washington, you beat him. Stop me when I'm saying something that's not true. This schedule this year was cupcake. And if you see Ohio State again, I'm not guaranteeing you're going to walk out of that with a win.
Well, no, and I agree, and I will say I hear that a lot. That like such and such, you didn't play anybody. How do we know you're good? Yeah, in a perfect world, would it be nice for these teams to get tested more than they do? Sure, it would. But there are ways, if you know what you're looking for, there are ways to tell if a team is good.
Yeah.
If they're blowing teams out the way that if you're playing a bunch of cupcakes and you're only winning by 7 points every week, okay, yeah, you're winning, but you're not doing what you're supposed to do. For the most part, Oregon has done what it's supposed to do in that it is blowing people out. You notice those first two games against Idaho and Boise State were close. They, like Ohio State with the defense, they adjusted a couple of things because their offensive line was going through some flux. They locked it down and they started dog walking people. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that Oregon is legitimately a good team. I mean, they've got guys on defense. They're receivers. I mean, Tez Johnson, he played for
He's
Ohio State. He played for anybody. He is really good.
oh
Gabriel,
yeah.
I've talked about how much I like. Um, their defense with DJ Uyungale's brother, Mateo, he's been getting after it. Jordan Birch, their linebacker, Jeffrey Bassa. I don't love their secondary, but they are tough and physical. They're a bunch of Davison Igminosons. They may hold occasionally, and you may be able to beat them. They're not what you'd call top shelf guys, but you're going to know you're in a battle if you play them. So would it shock me if Oregon won the whole thing? Not in the least. But I'm with you. I'm not automatically going to be like Austin and say no one's beating Oregon. There are 5 teams to me that can win this whole thing, and Oregon is one of them. But if they don't, I'm not going to go, oh my God, did you see that?
I agree. And that's why I said that, because I'm going to be honest, and this is not the homer in me talking. Ryan Day's job is on the line. You lost. I don't care what nobody says about what I'm about to say. It's showing itself to be partially true. And the partial truth is your 4th loss against Michigan. You are starting to remind me of John Cooper in the sense you are struggling against Michigan. And once again, this is another Nick Saban scenario. You were left the keys to the Lamborghini and you keep crashing it. With that being said, Ohio State is my favorite. And here's why Ohio State is my favorite. I'm going to bring this bracket right back up. Out of all of the 12 teams, Ohio State's quality wins and ranked wins are on the same side of the bracket. Can you name them? For those watching, it's Indiana and Penn State. Everybody thought Indiana was going to go into Ohio State, a place they haven't won since 1988. I was born in 86, so take 2 years
Darkest
away.
day. Darkest day, too. I was at that game.
Oh, man, I'm sorry. I apologize. Yeah. But you haven't won in Columbus since 1988. Penn State, Ohio State's little brother. There's no other way to say that. It's truth. Ohio State, Penn State, at the time was one of the youngest members of the Big Ten. They had played Ohio State before they joined the Big Ten, but they were struggling. You get into the Big Ten and you're still struggling against Ohio State. You don't beat Ohio State often. Those are the 2 quality wins. And in those wins, both teams were picked to either beat Ohio State or hang with Ohio State. They didn't. Oregon struggled against Ohio State defensively. Keep that in mind. I get it. Everybody's going to say, oh, that was early in the season. We made changes. So did Ohio State. Mm-hmm. If you noticed, Michigan didn't do the same thing they did last year against Ohio State, which was pound the ball down their throat.
Correct. They had Davis Warren making some throws, which I was as amazed as anybody to see him doing.
Which wasn't, even though he did make some throws, they were few and far in between.
Right.
So think about the defensive standpoint of where Ohio State is looking. We struggled, and we shouldn't have struggled against Oregon. We struggled against our rival in Michigan. You don't think in the back of their mind that those eyes are blood red right now?
Oh yeah, they are. And this is how I break it down. Again, Oregon has my ultimate respect. I actually picked them to go 12-0 in the Big Ten. Now, I did have Ohio State beating them in the rematch in the Big Ten championship game, but I did have Oregon getting through the season unbeaten. That said, what is the old football adage when it gets to be late in the year? Defense travels. Mm-hmm. Ohio State statistically has the number 1 defense in America in terms of points allowed. In terms of yards per play, they're second to Texas, and Texas has a really legitimate defense. And for my money, they've got the best defensive player in America in Caleb Downs. So generally, when you have the best player, you have a little bit of an advantage. And what's the one thing you notice about Caleb Downs? He doesn't miss tackles in space. A lot of other guys, because Oregon's got playmakers. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. They've got guys who can make you look silly, as Denzel Burke learned in that game. You're not going to make Caleb Downs look silly, and he has been week by week getting a little closer to the line of scrimmage, getting up on the line, doing a blitz, doing a drop back, and getting in the quarterback's line of vision. Jim Knowles has been using him expertly. Caleb Downs is like another coach on the field. He's very smart. He runs downhill. He doesn't get caught up in traffic, and the kid can tackle. He may not whomp you with a shoulder where people are going to be just going, oh, he's just going to wrap you up. And if he hits you after 2 yards, you're gaining 2 yards. You're not getting out of his tackle and getting 3 or 4 more yards. So,
Exactly.
for that reason, I also like Ohio State to win it. And as much as Michigan is in Ryan Day's head from a whatever standpoint, last time we saw this, Georgia was supposed to run Ohio State out. And Ryan Day called one of his best games. They executed it very well. He called one of his best games, came down to a 50-yard field goal, which didn't have much of a chance of making it, but 42-41. And if not for Marvin Harrison going out of the game on a somewhat questionable hit, OSU probably wins that game.
Man, you
So,
you hit the nail
so,
right on the head.
so really, two big games. Oregon wins by 1 at their place, and Georgia wins by 1 essentially at their place. So, so really, I actually think the pressure, while it will be there, I think at least from a playing standpoint, I think Ryan Day and Chip Kelly are going to see the pressure being off. We can just go let it rip.
Right. Oh, I want everybody to hear this part too, since you brought that up, because we got to move on to these other games. But I want everybody to pay attention to this part too. There is only one team in Ohio State's entire schedule this year to get 30 points against them. Guess who it was? It was Oregon.
Oregon. Yep.
If Ohio State can make it past Tennessee, do you think that's going to happen again? I don't think so.
I don't know. It can. I don't know that it will. Like I said, with the tweaks that Knowles has made, and he still is bringing something new out each week. So I'm sure he's got something in his bag for Tennessee, and I think he's got something in his bag for Oregon the second time around. That Dan Lanning's going to go, oh, we didn't see that the first time around.
Exactly. And that was my thing. You got 30 points off. You got that one. You got that one. You ain't getting it again. Moving on. Texas hosts Clemson, who snuck by on a 57-yard field goal last night. I still can't believe that one. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't think Texas is gonna let that happen. I don't think
I
you're
don't either.
you're going in the Memorial Stadium with Darrell K. Royal Stadium. It's loud. Bevo's gonna be there. I just don't think, with the way Texas is playing defensively, I don't see that this will be a pleasant experience for Clemson. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't think Clemson has played Texas very often. If not, this is the first time.
Yeah, I don't have the history with me. I know that if they've played, it's been maybe once or twice, but I'm with you. Texas is going to be seething. They know they should have beaten Georgia. They dominated that first half, and it was 6-3. Bert Auburn missed what, 3 field goals? And he's normally more reliable than that. Texas has dudes at every level. This freshman kid they've got up on the line, Colin Simmons, get used to this kid's name because you're going to be hearing a lot about him in the next few years. They've got a linebacker, Anthony Hill Jr., number 0, who I love. And they've got a Thorpe Award finalist in Jahdae Barron on the back end. So if you've got a difference maker at every level of your defense, you're going to make it difficult for another team to do stuff. And Clemson's going to learn, oh, we just ran through a Texas team. Well,
That's
SMU
not the
is
same
in
Texas
Texas,
team.
but their defense is not what Texas's defense is.
Dallas and Austin play two different types of football, baby.
Correct.
And I just did my research on this. This will be the first ever matchup between
Okay.
Texas and Clemson. So, with that being said, I am going to assume, and I'm going to go under a strong assumption. When you go to Texas at Austin, people, Austin, not SMU in Dallas. When you
Right.
go to Austin, it's going to be hostile. It's going to be loud. And Clemson, yeah, you play in Death Valley, but you're going to Austin. If you know anything about college football, recruiting wise, there's only one state about above five others, and Clemson State, South Carolina, ain't on that list. The number one
No.
team, the number one state in recruiting is Texas. So
Well,
don't be
and
surprised.
anyone who's been there who even sees the high school stadiums that look better than some FCS stadiums,
Man, they look
it
better than
is
some damn college stadiums I've seen.
it is a religion down there. And so now, on one hand, Clemson is playing with house money. I don't think they expected to be here. They're going to be loose. So I don't expect them to have nerves because Dabo has had teams in the playoff before. He's won 2 national titles. So they're not going to be overwhelmed by their surroundings because he's used to it. And they're playing with house money. I just think Texas defensively is too good.
Yeah,
And especially if Quinn Ewers is, I mean, he got banged up a little bit with weeks to rest. I think he should be okay. But you know what? If he's not, Arch Manning comes in. They had a couple of those innovative plays where the snap between the quarterback's legs to the running back. I hadn't seen that in probably forever. So I, there's a reason that all of these first round games, the closest point spread is Ohio State by 7. I think that Vegas knows that these games potentially have a chance to get out of hand.
I agree. I agree. Gonna go to the bottom right side of the bracket. Penn State and SMU. Officially, we're gonna touch this game. This will be the third all-time meeting between Penn State and SMU. Uh, the Nittany Lions are 1-0-1 against SMU. They won in 78 and then they tied in 47. It's it's Texas versus PA. Dallas versus Beaver. Um, can Coach Franklin get over the hump of these
You know
big
what?
games where he's supposed to
Yeah,
win?
he definitely does. But here's the thing. Again, I was a little bit surprised last night how well they responded to adversity. Oregon got up one time by 14 and was getting ready to take it in again. And I think Penn State might have forced a turnover. And even though I never got the sense Penn State was going to win the game, they did not fold up and they ended up losing by like 7, 8 points. And they were more than respectable. I love SMU's offense with Brashard Smith at running back. He's a weapon out of the backfield. Kevin Jennings gave the team an identity on offense when people forget they lost to BYU. Kevin Jennings hadn't played quarterback yet for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's really infused some life into them, and he's a dangerous guy. That said, I don't love SMU's defense. They've got a couple of guys. Their interior guy, um, Harrison Hunt, inside at defensive tackle. He can wreck some things, but they don't have each level the type of guys that Penn State has. So I think this is probably a close game for halftime, maybe even in the third quarter. I just think Penn State is too well balanced on both sides that they're probably going to win this game. It's not going to be a blowout, but I could see 10 to 14 point win for Penn State.
I agree with the win, but what I'm going to say is after watching SMU's defense last night, where they were actually getting stops against Clemson, 3-and-outs, a couple turnovers. I'm not going to say that the defense worries me, but what I'm going to say is leading into this game, they might want to shore up the secondary because if they
Yeah.
don't, it's going to cause problems. And if we watched the game last night, Clemson was giving every DB that played for SMU their issue. And
Mm-hmm.
that drives a coach crazy. If Penn State exploits this again and we see that it hasn't been corrected, I'm going to say 21-point game for Penn State. Because if you can't stop anybody through the air, you can't stop anybody. You're not going to be able to stop anybody in the play action. So give me Penn State, but it's going to be some factors. Can Penn State or can SMU stop the pass or at least slow it down?
Right.
And final game on the top right side of our bracket, Indiana versus Notre Dame. I honestly feel like this is going to be a snoozer just because uh
Middle of Indiana. If it's basketball, call me. because that would be a good basketball matchup back in the day with
You're right. You're right.
what Adrian Dantley going against Calvert Chaney and some of the great players that have come through those schools. But Battle of Indiana, you know what? Bravo to Indiana. Kurt Signetti did what no one thought he could do. I thought Indiana would be an improved team. I had their ceiling at 6-6, going to a bowl game, nice turnaround. Did not expect them to do anything close to what they did. So bravo to you. Unfortunately, Notre Dame is built a lot the same that Ohio State is. Identity on defense, guys who can bother you at every level. Xavier Watts is an interception machine in the secondary. Their linebackers are really good, and they should be getting Howard Cross back up front because he's been hurt a little bit. And Indiana did not deal well with the defensive construction of Ohio State. You know it's going to be loud at in
Notre
South
Dame.
Bend,
Touchdown
and
Jesus will
so
be behind you.
he will. And so while I do think Indiana has a chance to make some shock plays every now and again, because I do think Curtis Rourke is pretty good, I just think you look at the roster, Notre Dame is better than them. Notre Dame is used to being in this position. They've been in the playoffs a few times. And Marcus Freeman seems to be getting a lot more comfortable on the sidelines. That first year, he looked a little bit like a fish out of water, like maybe the school was too big for him. He's really settled in nicely. And I think people realized that Northern Illinois game, that wasn't a signal of trouble. That was just, you know what, we had a bad day. And that happens to even the best teams.
It does.
And
It does.
so I think people can put the Northern Illinois behind them. And Notre Dame has played as well as anybody the last 6 or 7 weeks. Yeah, their schedule hadn't been great, but they've been boat racing people the way they're supposed to. So I agree with you. This one to me will probably be the biggest point spread of the first round games. If Indiana can keep this within 21, 24, then to me, that's kind of a moral victory. Because I could see Notre Dame like 38-14, 38-16, something like that. So I think it could get ugly pretty quick. Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, those guys are really good in the backfield. And Notre Dame can control the clock, but they can also play tempo.
I'm going to throw this out there. Historically, Notre Dame is 23-5-1 against Indiana. They're 13-1-1 at home, 6-3 away, and 4-1 on a neutral site. So that means no matter where this game would be played, Notre Dame has owned Indiana.
Yep.
They have not played, mind you, they have not played since September of 1991. And even then, it was a beatdown in favor of the Irish. If you're Indiana, you're already at a disadvantage. Why? Because you can't escape Ohio State. Reason I'm saying you can't escape Ohio State, who's Notre Dame's head coach? Former Ohio State player, Marcus Freeman. So if it's anybody that knows how to deal with Big Ten teams, it would be Marcus Freeman. You were lucky. I don't care what anybody says. Your schedule was just as bad as Oregon's this year. You were lucky to get in because, one, you stayed ranked all season. You also had it to where you fought hard against Ohio State. Realistically, this should be Catholics versus Convicts part 42. It should be Miami versus Notre Dame, but it's not. So because of this, the reason I say it's a snooze fest is because if Notre Dame 21s Indiana in the first quarter, you might as well cut this game off.
Yep.
And I'm sorry for you Indiana fans, but this is the reality. You have not played anybody outside of Penn State and Ohio State, and you lost both games.
Well, and again, don't get me wrong. It's a great story. Like we've said, new blood coming in, always nice to shake things up. But you're right. when they have looked to be tested against a legitimate team, yeah, they went down and scored the first time they had the ball against Ohio State. What
And
happened the
that was
rest of the
it.
game? You had 81 yards the rest of the game. That's basically 3 quarters and like 8 minutes that you had 81 yards. So,
Hmm.
and again, if Notre Dame was constructed differently, maybe I'd give Indiana more of a chance, but they look a lot like Ohio State does on defense.
And that's the scary part because you can't, again, you can't escape Ohio State
Right.
because who do you let's be real about this. We're player, analyst, coaches talk.
Well, yeah.
Coaches talk. So you don't think Marcus Freeman said, Coach Day, let me holler at you for a second. What y'all do against Indiana? Stopped them after that first drive. Well,
Mm-hmm.
this is what we did. We did this, this, and this. You don't think they're gonna go back and look at film and say, oh, bet. Now
Yep.
we'll tweak this and we'll tweak this. Good luck. So
Yep.
as much as much of a feel good story as it is for Indiana, you really got lucky. You got a Bama team that lost to two subpar teams that they shouldn't have lost to outside of Texas, and then Miami's f ups just came back to bite them in the ass.
Right.
That's really how you got in here.
The other thing I like about Notre Dame is they had minimal time to prepare for Army. And you, as a player, know if you have 1 week to prepare for the type of option offense that Army runs, that flex bone, it
Woo-wee.
can turn you in circles. And Army scored on their first drive, and then Notre Dame buckled down and it won the game 49-14. And it's Army's only loss of the year. And Army's a great story too, but when they went up against a big boy, they kind of got exposed. So had Notre Dame struggled a little against Army, I'd say, okay, Indiana,
You
you've
got a
got a
shot.
shot because but if you can shut down an option offense that completely, then I think it's pretty scary what Indiana's up against.
Yeah, because true story. We were broadcasting a youth game once, and the team that was the team that my client was broadcasting, they were running the wing T.
Ah,
And I walked up to the head coach. I said, look, man, you about to have problems. Why? The team you playing against, man, they in the wing T. Okay, what that mean? Oh, your kid's about to be run. This gonna be their cardio right here today.
yep.
Because for those watching, for any player that's gonna watch this later, if you have never seen Army in action, don't even worry about going back and watch a game. Just go play college football 25 and play with Army's offense. It is so complex. It looks simplistic, but it is so complex because
Mhm.
there are literally, there are 8 plays you can run off of one play.
Yep.
And when you have that ability, and keep this in mind, I say this and I'm gonna die on this hill with this. If Army was not worried about protecting the country and they had the same kind of athletes that Notre Dame had,
Oh
do
yeah.
you understand how different that game would have been?
Yep.
I told my players this last night. Army's not Army's not recruiting players. They're recruiting guys who want to protect the country. If they were
Hmm.
recruiting guys who just want to play, Notre Dame does not beat them in that offense because you have too many weapons in what looks like a run formation, but you
Hmm.
just turned it into 8 different pass plays.
Right.
So don't be surprised if Indiana comes out, they get one good drive, and then the rest of the game, it's just we ain't worried about you.
Yep.
And that's the scary for me. That's the worst game out of this entire bracket because you snuck in when you should be playing. You should be playing a New Year's Day bowl, but you should not be in the playoff. I'll give you the New Year's Day bowl. You earned
Right.
that much. But playing in the playoff, I honestly would have gave it to Miami, but Miami couldn't beat Georgia Tech, so here we are.
Right.
Now, winner of Tennessee Ohio State will face number 1 Oregon. Winner of Texas Clemson will face Big 12 champion Arizona State, which was a surprise to me because I did not have Arizona State winning anything. Making a bowl game, having a good record, yes, but winning the entire Big 12, I was not expecting that. But winner of that Texas Clemson game will face Arizona State. Winner of Indiana Notre Dame, which will probably be Notre Dame, expect to see, I'm going to be honest, expect to see a Notre Dame Georgia matchup. And finally, SMU Penn State winner will go to Boise State. So, with that being said, who advances out of that first round group?
I think that the first round advancers are probably going to be all of the chalk. I think OSU beats Tennessee, although I do think it will end up being a pretty good game. I think Penn State will beat SMU. I think Texas will be pretty comfortable against Clemson, and I think Notre Dame will beat Indiana. So I think that the chalk holds up in
Okay.
round one.
All right. Round quarterfinals.
If there is going to be an upset, I think it would be SMU over Penn State. But I think Penn State, like I said, they're balanced enough on both sides of the line of scrimmage that I think it's going to be difficult for SMU to consistently do a lot against them.
I agree, but that would be my sleeper pick too. So I agree with that one. Quarterfinal matchups. What are your picks for that?
It's difficult to pick games without knowing the circumstance that they're going to be coming into. Guys could be hurt, but knowing what we know right now, and I'm going to assume that Carson Beck may be hurt more than it looks like.
We
I
saw that.
actually was kind of impressed with the young guy when he came in, and I think with some practice time, I think he's going to end up being okay. But again, I think Notre Dame is. I know people don't like them. I don't particularly like them, but I think this is a pretty good Notre Dame team. They're one of the, when I said there are 5 teams that can win it, I think they're one of them. I think that their defense is really good, and I think their offense, it can lull you to sleep, but it can also make some explosive plays. So I think Notre Dame, just because of the quarterback situation that Georgia has, I think Notre Dame can win a squeaker over Georgia. So that would be considered an upset because it's 7-2. Penn State going to Boise, that one could be tough because it could be like the UNLV game was, where it was 15 degrees and there's a gloss over the blue turf and it's difficult footing. I will say, if any team is equipped to stop Ashton Ginty, it's Penn State's defense. The way they play, they kind of have that shell with the secondary so that guys don't break really long plays. I mean, even Ohio State, they were methodically moving the ball. They didn't have running play wise. They didn't have a whole lot of big plays. Penn State doesn't give up a lot of big plays on the ground.
Very
Penn
true.
State probably wins that one, but would it shock me if Boise won? No, but I think Penn State is the more well-rounded team. Texas and Arizona State. I love Arizona State. Kenny Dillingham, great hire. Cam Scatterbo, one of the best, most fun guys to watch. Sam Levitt is a freshman quarterback that you're going to be hearing a lot from in the next few years. I would not bet against Arizona State at all. But again, Texas, what travels? Defense travels, and Texas has a great defense. So, but that one also, I think, goes down to the wire. I think Texas has just enough to make 1 or 2 more plays. And if everything is as it is today, Ohio State and Oregon, I think Ohio State exacts revenge, wins by a field goal.
Now, because you said that, I have to ask. Throw the playoff into an alternate universe if we can for 5 seconds. What if Texas never left the Big 12 and we're seeing the same bracket? Is Arizona State playing Clemson, or are they going, is Texas, does Texas have the bye? Do you believe? Because I'm
Yes,
I'm with
I
that.
think Texas in the Big 12 would have had a bye. Yes.
Okay. All right. So we're there. All right, fair enough. Outside of that, I because I want to come back to this conversation when we know more after the first round. So we're going to save that. And what I'm going to say is to leave our folks watching with this what if? What if everything we say comes true? And and by no means, Mike, I don't want you to answer this right now because like you, I want to wait until we know more. But for those watching at home, here's the question for you. What if everything we said holds true? Think about that until we come across the next couple of weeks because we're going to come back and circle the wagons on this conversation. But with that being said, don't forget to like and follow us on Facebook. You can see all of our shows on our YouTube channel, 216 Sports Network, our Facebook, 216 Sports Network, where you can find the Ruler's Minute with Rico McGee, the Straw Brothers Sports Show, the Jay Rich Show, 4th and 15 with Mel and Smooth, and Outside Interference. You can also follow Mike at College Football Focus on Facebook and Twitter. We're both working on Instagram, so we will let you guys know when that gets better. So please just bear with us on that. Uh, don't forget, special shout out to KZ Productions for having us on their airwaves as well. You can also find our show on their YouTube channel. We're going to try to get on both YouTube and their Facebook channel as soon as we can. So, with that being said, thank you guys at home for watching 4th and 15. We hope you enjoyed it. Thank Mike again for being on the show because this man is very knowledgeable. I've learned more from him about college football than I could ever just sit there and watch on my own.
Thanks for having me.
And we're going to give you your applause while you deserve it. So, for Mike, for me, thank you guys for watching 4th and 15 with Mel and Smooth. So, peace.
It's happened, baby. It's happened, baby.